Welcome to the Life Unscripted Podcast with Rosabel, the place where genuine conversations meet inspiring stories, personal growth, and a dash of humor. I'm Rosabel, your host, inviting you to embrace life's unpredictable journey. Celebrate your unique story and find joy in everyday moments. Get comfortable, stay curious, and let's explore together. Unscripted, unapologetic, and unstoppable. Welcome back to another episode of the Life Unscripted Podcast with Rosabel. I'm your host, Rosabel Zohfeld. And today, we're going to be diving into a topic that is very dear to my heart, grandparenting an autistic child. We're joined by a very special guest. Welcome to the show.
My name is Jennifer Calfman, and I am the principal of a wonderful school in New Jersey that specializes in supporting kids with autism. And we have kids from age 6, 7 years old, right up through 21. In addition to that, I am also the grandmother of a 7-year-old boy named Ben, who is also on the spectrum.
Tell me about what got you interested in working with special needs children.
Sure. I started out my career as a teacher. I was an English teacher in a gen ed environment, and I had the opportunity to become an assistive technology coordinator at a school for kids with learning disabilities. And that led me into the field of special education. And as the years went by, I noticed more and more students with autism were part of our student population. I eventually went on to get my principal's certificate because I felt that supporting teachers, particularly in special education, was something that I really wanted to do. I saw teachers working so hard, and I felt that they needed that type of support. So now, a few years ago, I found myself at this lovely school that specialized in kids with autism, and it's just been a really terrific experience being there.
Wow, that's amazing. All the work that you can do to help those children, the teachers, and also the parents, right?
Right.
That is amazing. And then, so you lead presentations and workshops for families, it's my understanding. And you also offer personalized guidance to grandparents and how to build meaningful connections with their autistic, and in that case, grandchildren, but also try to navigate all the family dynamics. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So navigating those family dynamics is one of the reasons why I wrote Grandparenting on the Spectrum. And it's a journey from both sides of the desk. It's available on Amazon because I found that there's lots of support for our kids. There's lots of support for families, parents, but I was seeing grandparents talked about at meetings, or I was noticing grandparents showing up at meetings. And, what was their role was sort of the question. And then when I became a grandparent myself to a child with autism, I realized that it was a really unique journey, and a journey that's very different because you're not only trying to support your grandchild, but you're also trying to support your adult child.
Wow, that is definitely unique. In fact, I was gonna say so you do wear two hats. You are a school principal, and then you're also a grandmother. And so I wanted to perhaps know how that each perspective has shaped one or the other.
I think that my role as a grandmother has significantly shaped my perspective as a school principal, because in the past, I've always understood families and extended families, but I never really understood that dynamic that a grandparent has to face where, you think that you're the expert, right? Because you're the elder statesman of the family. You are the person that has all of the experience raising kids. But now really you have to step back and understand that your adult child is really the expert on their child, and changing that expectation. Because as a grandmother, my visions when my daughter was pregnant was, baking cookies and giving advice and, doing all of these great things as a grandmother. But that has to shift, and that has to sort of take a back seat to trying to understand what not only your grandchild needs, what their parent needs as well.
Wow, that's very interesting. And now, what can you say are perhaps one of the most rewarding moments that you have witnessed, both as a grandmother and an educator as well?
Oh my gosh, as an educator, I experience really magical moments almost every single day with kids just growing and progressing. Because, as I tell my parents, this is not a race to a common finish line. This is a journey that each child is taking. For myself in my role as a grandparent, I mean, even just this past weekend, it was Mother's Day, and getting to spend the day with my grandson and listening to his growth and progress, new words that he's learning or new ways of interacting with his environment. It's truly, it's magical. It's really
Wow.
when you see progress happening, understanding that we're looking for progress. We're not looking for perfection, and we're not looking for some kind of huge goal. We're looking for progress and celebrating that.
Absolutely. When it comes to taking those challenges, vantage points, and then at the same time, are one of those challenges that perhaps has surprised you as a grandmother?
I think that one of the challenges that I face as a grandmother is because I have so much professional experience in education, it's very difficult to take a back seat to my daughter, right?
Right.
So I I have lots of information to provide, but unless somebody is willing to, unless somebody needs that information, it just sort of falls on deaf ears. Because why, if you're not asking for advice, why am I giving advice? And that, I think all grandparents have to sort of keep themselves in check when it comes to that, because providing too much too soon when it's not really wanted can be very counterproductive. So understanding that piece, kids with special needs, their parents are getting advice at the grocery store. They're getting advice, getting gas in their car. Someone's giving them advice. Oh, you have a child with autism. This is what you need to do. And you don't want to become just another one of those voices in the crowd giving them advice that they're not really looking for.
Well,
So timing that advice is important. I like to send an email with, a little subject line that just says, hey, I heard this, take what you like and leave the rest. And just let it lie, because we've raised intelligent adult children and they can figure out what kind of information they're looking for.
yeah, and when it comes to autism, there's still so much education that needs to be, there's so much out there. There's so many
Mhm.
myths and ideas, and a lot of people don't fully even understand what is autism all about. So try to navigate all that. And there's also this idea of the content, newer things. It's kind of like anything, in medicine and different things. It's not the same as at the beginning when we first learned a little bit about autism. Good news is we have, I think it was this past month, was it April, Autism Awareness Month?
Correct?
Yes. Yes. And I had a speaker, someone here who was speaking very eloquent. Actually, she has autism herself and she had become to be a writer. She's a special education teacher. And so taught me a lot, taught me a lot. A lot of times we think we know a little bit, and there's even more than just what we hear in the news from other people. So it is so, so important. And then the job that you're doing per se, also helping those parents, I mean, the grandparents also to connect with with their grandchildren. So that's very, very important. Also, you talk a lot about, again, building meaningful connections. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Oh, it's about the building, right? We want to have the connections. We want them to be meaningful, but that really falls back on the building. And that building process is something that takes time, and it takes a lot of trust, and it takes a lot of listening versus talking, right? As grandparents, we want to talk and we want to impart our knowledge. But in this case, the building is really dependent upon listening and observing and learning to understand your grandchild, whatever that may look like, and learning to be there for them in a way that really supports who they are, not who you want them to be or not who you think they might be, but really who they are.
Right, in a way that comes across as non-judgmental, yeah, in a way. And then for a grandparent who perhaps is not sure where to start, what would be like a small practical step that you would recommend today, like something to begin on this process?
I think that as a grandparent, understanding that silence has value and stepping back has value and really becoming the observer of your grandchild and really becoming the listener when it comes to your adult child, listening to hear what they need, listening to hear what they've been told about the type of support your grandchild might need, providing a quiet space in your home for your grandchild to spend time. If there's too much sensory activity going on, they might want to go into a darkened room or a quiet room where they have some familiar items and they can just regulate themselves instead of being in the thick of it. Family gatherings are sometimes very noisy and chaotic and lots of people coming and going. And in situations like that, it might be nice for your grandchild to just feel that they have a quiet space to go to get away from it when needed.
Absolutely. I've recently learned a little bit about autism, that it's about the regulation, like you mentioned, a lot about it. And then also grandparents have a lot of time and love to give, right? But how can they turn that into something that looks like a structure, routine, or rituals that actually support the grandkids, right?
And
And
those, let
then
me
what?
tell you,
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry, those rituals are so important. There are certain things that my grandson and I do, little songs that we sing or little toys, a certain train set that we play with. And that happens every single time I see him and he looks for it. And to me, those are the type of connections that bond us because he understands when he comes to see me, well, this is what to expect. And that routine really gives a child with autism a sense of comfort and reassurance that they understand the environment that they are going into.
That is amazing to think about that. I'm a mother. I have a 4-year-old. I mean, she doesn't have autism per se, but we do have our routines. We have, and I realized that every time those rituals happen, those routines happen, that is the moment where I actually feel the closest to her. And I myself, as a mother, look forward to those times just as she does, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a moment of connection. And
Sure.
so, absolutely. And then, of course, the next thing I was going to go over is learning how to navigate the family dynamics, because every family has different rules, regulations, you name it. Sometimes, like you were mentioning, sometimes actually grandparents do worry a lot about overstepping boundaries, overstepping. And so that's what you were saying. How do they collaborate with their adult children to just say ensure that everyone is on the same page? Do you have any
Mm-hmm.
tips for that?
Yes, my greatest piece of advice would be to let your adult child lead the way. Because, again, like I started out this conversation saying, by thinking of ourselves as the expert parenting people in the family, and by insisting that our way is the only way, it is very counterproductive. That is not what our adult kids need. Right. As a new mother, I'm sure that you wanted information, but you also wanted to be able to find your own way, find your own style of parenting. And I think that providing the help when it's asked for is important, and not overstepping and not acting on your own expectations. You sort of have to abandon your expectations and understand that you're going to go with the flow and you're going to be there as a support system and a resource when it's asked for, and as a great grandparent to your grandchild.
Absolutely. And then there's also the concept of self-care. So self-care for the grandparent, and because taking care of caring in general for an autistic grandchild or a child can be emotionally, let's call it intense, perhaps, in a way. So what would be like a self-care advice that you can offer grandparents?
I'm actually laughing because I spent the day yesterday with my grandson. And like it or not, when he leaves, self care has to happen because we're exhausted. And that's just because, we're grandparents and we are working with the child that, I don't live with my grandchild. I see him maybe every week or so. And it's exhausting work, it's hard work. I get down on the floor with them. I run around. We dance. I sing to him. There's a lot of energy that goes into developing that relationship and nurturing it. And afterwards, geez, there's a value in a good nap, right?
Yes.
And making sure that you can take care of yourself. And also beforehand, making sure that you're rested and you understand what you're getting into when it's time to babysit or when it's time for a visit.
Very good. Can you tell us a little bit more about your workshops and guides, like about the workshops that you promote?
Sure. I speak to senior groups of grandparents and basically address some of the issues that we're addressing today on this podcast. I will take questions and have conversations. I do some one-on-one consulting because occasionally there are grandparents that have very unique situations and they might want to just talk, and we'll have a Zoom meeting or we'll have an in-person meeting if they're local to discuss that. And there's lots of information about it on grandparentingonthespectrum.com, which is my website. Feel free to visit. We also just started providing training to local police departments as well and emergency services. And this came about because we saw a child with autism who was lost, and we saw the police department trying to address that child's needs, not quite understanding that the child had autism because he couldn't speak and say it. And so now we're developing trainings for police departments as well.
Which is very, very important.
Yeah.
And very much needed. Jen, is there anything I have not asked you that you perhaps wanted to share? I was going to say, hey, how can the our listeners connect with you? But you mentioned your website is a good place to contact you, and you are on social media, right?
Yes, actually, that term grandparenting on the spectrum is my Instagram, my Facebook login, my Facebook page, my website. Everything revolves around grandparenting on the spectrum. So please, by all means, my email address is jen@grandparentingonthespectrum.com. Feel free. I love hearing from grandparents and talking about their experiences. So by all means, reach out.
And remind us again, what is the name of your book?
Sure. It's Grandparenting on the Spectrum,
Okay.
the journey from both sides of the desk.
Wow. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Well, it covers a lot. It covers a lot of what we've been talking about today, but it also talks about holidays. How do you adapt holidays when one of your family members is on the spectrum? What kind of adjustments can be made? We talk about vacations. I write about long distance grandparenting, because not all grandparents live within an easy driving distance of their grandchild. So, how do you handle that? And I may only I live locally to my grandson, but during the pandemic, we couldn't see each other for over a year. And, how did we handle that? And a lot of what I learned during that experience can be applied to all grandparents who are separated by miles from their grandchild.
Yes, definitely. Those were very, very difficult times. A couple of years, if even after a little bit. What would be a piece of encouragement that you would leave for every grandparent out there listening right now?
I think a piece of encouragement would be the more you listen, the more you'll learn. And that learning bit, listening to the signals from your grandchild, listening to what their parents need, will help you learn how to be a better grandparent.
Absolutely. Hey, listening there's a lot of wisdom. It's a lot that we can learn when we listen to others. Well, Jen, thank you so much for your insight. Thank you so much for sharing, again, your wisdom, because as we live, we learn, and we all have a little bit of wisdom. Even children have wisdom in themselves. So we can all learn from each other. So thank you so much for sharing. Please, listeners, don't follow Jen. Go out there to remind us again the name of your website, please.
Grandparenting on the Spectrum.
Grandparentingonthespectrum.com. Yes, and then please connect, send emails, messages. That's always important. That's what always I tell. Especially, I was just talking to an author of a book of how important today leaving reviews are, especially like if you have a book on Amazon. I have a book myself, and I get a lot of wonderful people that tell me, "Hey, I love your book. I love what you do," or they send me a text message, say, "Please, can you put that on Amazon?" Because that way it helps you rank, it helps other people discover your work, and so on. So thank you so much. And again, listeners, you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, like I said, share it with any grandparent or parents in your life. So thank you again. Until next time. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. I want to invite you, yes, you listening right now, to check out my book, The Courage to Succeed, A True American Dream. It is available now on Amazon and also Barnes & Noble. This is a story of resilience, grit, and what it really means to chase your dreams, even when the odds are stacked against you. If you ever face fear, failure, or uncertainty, this book will meet you right there and remind you that courage always has a voice. Just search The Courage to Succeed, A True American Dream by Rosabel Zohfeld on Amazon, or head to the link in the show notes, because your dream is worth it and your courage can take you there.